Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Bonnie Harris. Welcome to Integrate Online, presented by the West Virginia University College of Creative Arts and Media, which offers renowned online master's degree programs in marketing communications. Thank you for joining us again. Today we'll be discussing Breaking Barriers, Celebrating Women's Entrepreneurship Day with Jaime Hunt and Kristin Meeks. Please be sure to keep your mics muted for the session and send questions to the chat feature. We will be trying to answer questions as we progress today, so we don't have to wait till the end. So please do post those in the chat. Again, my name is Bonnie Harris. I'm the founder of Wax Marketing, which is an integrated marketing communications firm based in St. Paul that I founded in 2002. I'm also a professor in the program in the graduate school, and I'm very happy to be here with my two colleagues. Jaime, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your business?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bonnie. I'm excited to be here. My name is Jaime Hunt, and I am the founder and president of Solve Higher Ed Marketing, which is a marketing consulting firm that is focused on the higher education sector. I started the firm 4 months ago, so this is a fresh entrepreneurial journey for me. After working for about 20 years in higher education marketing, including 10 years as a vice president and chief marketing officer. And I'm also the host of a podcast, Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO.
Great. Kristin, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Kristin Meeks. I'm in West Virginia social media, which I started about 14 years ago. I'm actually going into my 15th year, trying to think of a good celebration there if I've made it that long. So what I do every single day is write content, distribute content, usually in the digital world, but I do have an integrated marketing communications degree, so I do enjoy doing that as well as, teaching and just learning more and trying to keep up with all the trends in the marketing world.
And I know that you do. I've heard you speak a couple of times, and Jaime, I've listened to your podcast, and both. I want
I
to
have
assure
two.
our
Like,
listeners that we have a couple of great experts here. We want to talk about some things that go back to kind of Jaime's experience that I think will be really relevant, being a little bit newer to entrepreneurship and perhaps to Kristin and mine. But when you guys started your business, I'm sure there were things that you really wish you knew before you started or that you know now, some challenges that were unexpected. If somebody is thinking or a woman is thinking about starting her own business, what's some of the advice? What are some of the surprises that you might have had? Kristin, I don't know if you want to kick us off with that.
absolutely. I think if I'd known everything I know now, I'm not sure if I would have done it. So that's
Oh,
okay. You just never know. It's probably better not to know everything, right? No, it's really been a great experience starting my own business. But I think too, there's a lot of challenges you don't think about. Like I know when I started my business, I was like, oh, taxes. I have a CPA. Like she'll just do all. That's all I need to know is CPA, and I have a great CPA, and I'm very fortunate to have a CPA. But there's a lot more that you need to know in terms of that kind of stuff. I think sometimes when we start our business, and I work with business owners every day, it's like we're so much in our own like what we're doing every day is that we kind of forget about all the other things that it takes, the marketing pieces, the networking, the accounting, which is definitely not my strength. And so I think that's where, I look at like what can I outsource, what can I continue to do myself, what makes more sense to find somebody that just has more expertise than I do. And that's kind of my whole business is people hire me because I have more expertise than them and maybe can do it quicker. Same thing when I'm looking at that kind of stuff. So I've kind of probably started out doing everything, trying to do everything on my own, like we all try to do, and then have kind of transitioned and realized very quickly my strengths and weaknesses. But I think one of the biggest challenges I see is everyone thinks that you have to have it all together when you start your business. And I really don't think that's the truth. I think you can kind of just jump in and figure it out as you go. And like I said, if I'd known everything starting off, I probably would have been too scared to do it, but kind of going
mhm.
and learning that way has been really beneficial to me and kind of just jumping into those challenges. head
Mhm.
first, yes.
I totally hear you on the fear part too. I think that's a big piece of it. But Jaime, what's your take on this particular question?
Yeah, this is all fresh for me. And I think the biggest surprise for me was that nobody tells you what you need to do. So, for example, if you start a business in 2024, you have something like 3 months to file this beneficial ownership report with the federal government. The only reason I know that is because I'm part of a group of other consultants, and somebody said, "Hey, does anybody know anything about this form?" Like, there's no handbook exactly walking you through everything you need to do to be, legit. Um, I would echo what Kristin said. I've outsourced bookkeeping immediately. I knew that that was not going to be my strength or a good use of my time. And I think that that's something, if you're thinking about starting a business, there are a lot of people that do fractional work. You don't have to hire a full-time bookkeeper or a full-time employee. There's a lot of people that have consulting companies that are giving you, 5 hours a month that you're paying for to do various tasks that are maybe outside of your expertise or not a good use of your time. And then finally, I would say I made the mistake of starting and launching my business before I had developed a really solid plan for what I was going to do, because I thought it'll take me a few months to get business. And I'm very grateful that it did not. The business took off immediately. But I would really recommend not to take that approach, because I'm still sort of trying to like build the plane as I'm flying it. And I think that I would feel more comfortable about the future if I had planned for the future before jumping into the consulting work that I'm doing.
And I think that's such a great point, Jaime, because I know for me, part of my challenge has been determining how much time to do on planning and strategy and how much I need to do on doing, so to speak. And I've had a business with my business is not up to 12 employees, and it's been me and an assistant. And that kind of has changed with that level. But I think also what I'm hearing you both say too is what's really important, I think, for me and for every business owner is to really understand your own skills and know where one is weaker and where one is stronger. And I think the problem with like not understanding or not having kind of a recipe for starting a business is that we're all so different. So, for example, for me, I'm very comfortable in the accounting world, and doing the books is no big deal to me. But certain other aspects that probably Kristin or Jaime can do in their sleep or just would really throw me for a loop. So understanding ourselves as women and as business owners is important, which kind of leads me to my next question. I'm going to throw this to you first, Jaime, which is, as a business owner, what skills or characteristics have been really helpful for you, do you think? And did anything also, any surprises there as well? Like something, you learned way back when has come back to be really helpful. Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that having a high tolerance for risk is really important for an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to really put yourself out there with no guarantee that anything is going to come of it. I mean, that's really at the end of the day, I think one of the most important. I'd also say I have a lot of strength in the area of flexibility and adaptability, um, and the ability to sort of go with the flow, I think has been really, really important as an entrepreneur. And I have to be really comfortable with um, uncertainty and with,
Mhm.
I don't know what next month is going to look like, or I don't know what next year is going to look like, and be okay with that. If you are somebody that needs that steady, the paycheck is going to always be the same, and it's going to be year after year, and the 3% raise next year, I don't think entrepreneurship is the right path necessarily. I would say one of the things that has surprised me is I found making this change into entrepreneurship to be a big pivot, as particularly after 20 years in higher ed, which is it's public higher ed is a very secure business for the most part, right? So I've always had state benefits. I've always had, steady paychecks. I think I had some issues with my voice a couple of weeks ago where I wasn't able to speak, and I was thinking about, am I going to have to change careers and pivot again? And it was so much easier to think about what a pivot might look like when you've made a pivot before. And I think that if you're thinking about starting a business, being a solopreneur, understanding your risk tolerance, but also your ability to make pivots and be adaptable and flexible and move with where the industry is going or where your clients are taking you, I think is just skill sets that you want and need to hone to be able to be successful.
And I think that goes to also kind of our general topic here in marketing, that it has changed so much since I started, I guess, 22 years ago. And my business has evolved and adapted, you know, as content marketing came up, as social media really came into play while I was working. And I think that your point about being able to pivot is good, but also I think there are a lot of ways that certain business owners I see get very rigid about what they're doing and how they do it. And we really have to understand. I mean, for me, I've always viewed my business as more of an organic entity that's really responding to external factors and adding new capabilities as needed, all those kinds of things. Before we go to Jaime, though, I do have a question, or I'm sorry, before we go to Kristin, I do have a question for you, Jaime, and that is, you mentioned something about risk tolerance and uncertainty. And I'm wondering if you have any personal tricks up your sleeve for those days where we all have, which I call the kind of gut-wrenching fear hits you, you know? I mean, is there anything that you do on a daily basis or any kind of meditation or anything that's helpful for you?
Yeah, it's interesting you said the word meditation because that was the very first thing I was going to say. I really believe in the power of meditation. I think it can help you change your mindset and change how you react to things. And I also think having a really good network of people that can remind you when you're having a hard day or you're going through a hard time that this is temporary, this is a setback, or this is a situation that you're going to get through it. I would say building my community of a mix of other higher ed marketers, other consultants, other solopreneurs, other small business owners has been absolutely invaluable because we kind of have each other's backs. And some days they're the ones who are crying and worried about the future. And sometimes it's me. And that just makes that community makes all the difference.
Right. And it's okay to cry, right?
Yes.
So Kristin, I'll let you chime in here. And I know that you have a pretty broad background of experience having met you before. I mean, what kind of skills or characteristics do you think make you so successful? I mean, 14 years is almost 15 is a huge accomplishment. So congrats on that.
So sometimes I forget. And then when I say
Uh-huh.
it, then people are like, oh, wow. I do forget that sometimes because I feel like sometimes you're just in the trenches and you're working along and you're thinking what's, like you said, taking the risk, what's the next thing that's happening. So I think the big one for me that I definitely did not have when I started my business, but have learned is just to not take things personal.
Mm.
Always try to take the high road. I try not to burn any bridges. Like if things don't work out, I just try not to take it personal. Now, do I do that in my personal life? Probably not. But in the business side, I think I've honed into it that I really can just not take things personal. Realize that people, maybe it's not a good fit for them right now, but it doesn't mean that it's not a good fit later on. And just keeping that going is a big one that I think that I've tried to learn with people. But then I've also pivoted my business to fit those people because for a long
Mhm.
time, even one of my very first clients was a politician, and so we know how
Wow.
that's a whole other ball game, but it's very personal, right? And so I've really tried to, like, I always joke and say I'm getting out of political marketing, and then like the bond and the levy people call me crying that they need help, and I help them, and then one of my very first clients refers me to somebody, so of course I help them, but it's very personal. And so for me, I try to departmentalize that a little bit. I try to realize it's business is business, leave it on the computer essentially. I really have tried to do that. That's a skill that I think that a lot of people, that's a big roadblock for them. It gets them down, it gets them depressed, it gets them thinking that, no one ever wants to use my business, I'm never going to be successful. And that mindset shift is something that I do think is another good skill set. I'm a big yoga person. And so I hear from a lot of people, oh, well, they're doing this and they're doing that. I hear that a lot, especially in social media. Oh, I need to be on this because I'm on here. And a big thing that I learned in yoga is stay on your own mat. Worry about what's going on in your own mat, and I really try to stick to that. I try to be aware of what's going on with my competitors, if you can call that, and then what's going on in the world. But I really do try to just stay on my own mat, and network and hit kind of like boots on the ground kind of thing. Somebody gave me a
Mhm.
compliment one time and said, I think the reason that you're in business and other people have not been successful in business is that you're not scared to put your boots on the ground and just, I would say I show up to things that maybe I'm not that I'm not invited to, but maybe that people are surprised I show up to, and I talk to people and I network, and just getting beyond that, not being scared to do that, I think has been, a key to my success over the years. But it's definitely, I mean, it's something that I wake up some days and I'm like, I do not want to go to that networking event. Like, I
Uh,
just like not in the mood. And like once I go, I love it and I'm rejuvenated and I love talking to people, but it's a challenge, even for someone that knows that's the way of the future and the way that you need to build your business. It's tough. And I think just doing stuff that's outside of your comfort zone every day, is going to be helpful.
right. And as you were talking, we're talking about going to networking events and making sure we're planning and all of that. But I also heard from both of you sort of the importance of the power of pause, whether it's yoga or meditation. And as entrepreneurs, I think we all face the risk of burnout every day, right? There's always something else to do. Your work is never done. You could work all weekend if you wanted to. So, um, I've heard, Kristin, you speak before, as I mentioned, and I've heard you talk about that as well. And I'm wondering if, and I'll throw this back to Jaime in a minute too, but do you have any tips or tricks for, especially starting out when there's so much sort of angst and pressure to get going? Are there things that you found to be particularly helpful to kind of keep your energy up, keep those pauses going, reduce that burnout?
I think one of the very first books I read was that 4 Hour Work Week. And I thought that was really interesting. Some of the tips were just like, don't check your email all day long, give yourself some time. And that just some stuff that's stayed with me over the years. I do try like to make time for myself every day. I try to do something I enjoy. I also try to say no to some things. So I'm involved in 3 chambers, which is just crazy in the small area I live in. So I could go to something every single day, all day long. I could go to breakfast, lunch, and dinner and network forever. And I just don't think that's, where I see my business going and where it's really beneficial to me. So I try to say no to things, but really lean into things that I enjoy because like we mentioned, we're solo, we're by ourselves. Like if I'm going to go out and do stuff, I want to be really involved with people that I enjoy being around. So I'm really involved with like the Women in Leadership conference because I believe in women leaders and all of that. So I try to really lean into those kinds of things. But then I also, on the other side of things, always try to make time for myself. I also try to, I have a daughter who's 11, so I try to be done to pick her up from school every day because that's really important to me. Because I only have like maybe 5 years left, if that, until she starts driving and she won't need me. So I really lean into that now. But that's that was different when I started my business and I didn't have her, and so I did work all the time, and it was definitely something that has taught me that burnout is not good. And so I try to really block time and do things like that for my business and clients, and just try to work that way so it doesn't feel like I'm just on all the time.
And it sounds like you try to do that plan that on a daily basis versus like trying to get the right balance over a week or a month. And I know I do that as well. As that kind of been your practice too, to kind of look at each day and make sure that there's time in there for you?
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
smart.
Day to day. Like but I think it's being an only child and always just being latchkey kid, like just always being
Uh-huh.
like that. Like I'm not giving that part of myself up, which is very easy to do. And not that I've not done that, but I definitely have tried to bring that back into my daily practice.
Great. I want to encourage everyone who's listening to pop into the chat. Tell us why you're here. Explain, provide any questions that you'd really like to hear answered today. We're all here for you and want to provide our feedback and our experiences to help new entrepreneurs or to help you if you're already an entrepreneur. I'd really like to know how many people are actually running their own businesses right now and how many are just considering it. So please do participate. Don't be shy. So Jaime, I would like to hear from you too. Like, how do you try to achieve balance as an entrepreneur, and how do you personally try to avoid some of that burnout that we know faces us on a regular basis?
The burnout piece is a big part of why I left higher ed marketing. As a vice president and a chief marketing officer in higher education, the pressure is just absolutely intense, particularly with the enrollment cliff coming and all of the challenges that come along with that, and with the changing demographics and the perceived value of higher education. Burnout, the work-life balance didn't exist as a vice president and CMO. And to be honest with you, so much of my time was spent in meetings, dealing with HR issues, dealing with budget issues, and not doing the work of being a marketer. And so for me, having a job now where I get to do that work, it doesn't feel like work, if that makes sense. So spending, a whole day working on a deck on a branding project is more fun than just about anything else I could also be doing. So a lot of times the work doesn't feel like work in that traditional sense. But one of the things I love is how my day flexes around me and what I feel like doing, and not around having your butt in a seat from 8 until 5. So if it's a beautiful sunny morning, I can go for a walk to the coffee shop in the morning, start my day at 9 or 10, maybe go for another walk in the afternoon, and then, come back and work again in the evening. If it's a truly beautiful day, go take the boat out and not work at all, but then maybe work on Sunday, and taking out that expectation of these are the hours that work happens, and throwing that out the window and saying work and life work is part of life is part of work, and they just flow together in this really natural way, has been, I think, the best part about doing this so far. I will say that I've learned a long time ago that the most important priority for me is health. And that drives me to make sure that I'm going for walks every day, that I'm taking time to have a healthy lunch. I'm not just sitting at my desk on my butt in a sedentary manner for 12 straight hours. I'm making sure I'm getting to those doctor's appointments and other medical appointments and prioritizing that. And I think if you can do that, if you can set your health as your highest priority, that will help you make the decisions that you need to make to balance your time and to have that better work-life balance.
I love that lesson. Set your health as the highest priority. And for me, that includes not just the physical health, but the emotional health too, right? When we're talking about burnout. I know for me, having done this for a couple of decades, I tend to overdo a lot of things. Nothing for me is worth doing unless it's done to excess. I think that's kind of an entrepreneurial trait for all of us, men and women, and everyone. I know that for me, checking my energy levels and checking my mood on a regular basis is really important, because as you mentioned earlier, it's important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And I think we all need to get better at that. We do have a question from Heather Martinez, who started Fearless in a Dress business in 2020. She does business consulting and productivity coaching. Heather's question is, she'd like to know what drives us to stay motivated every day. Kristin, do you want to take a crack at that one?
I think it depends on the day. But I think going into business, it was kind of the same thing. I, wanted to leave the burnout and I wanted to do something for myself and I wanted to plan my days around what I wanted to plan around. So each day is kind of different, motivated wise. I am rejuvenated when I work on like this time a month I'm working on the next months of content and I could just sit down and again when it's over I'm like, oh, this is amazing. It didn't feel like work. So that motivates me. But I think too is like long-term goals of stuff. I live in a pretty rural area. And so, doing the work I'm doing and the corporate level would look completely different. My days would look completely different than they look for me today. So my long-term goals of, trying to kind of quote unquote retire when my daughter graduates high school, like those kinds of things motivate me. I also just love helping people. And, I think she was asking about, like any kind of work we do with like nonprofits and things like that, being able to help some nonprofits because I've landed some amazing business clients, I guess you would say, and I'm able to help those nonprofits at a rate that they can afford. That motivates me too, to maybe say, okay, I'm going to take the challenge. This client's going to be challenging, but in return, I can help this nonprofit who's reached out to me before and I know they need help, whether it's volunteering or just, making a reduced cost. So those kinds of things kind of motivate me to be able to pick and choose kind of who I work with and what my days look like.
I totally agree with you. And I guess if I were to answer that question, for me, it's been making sure that the clients that I have and the business that I'm working on is meaningful. Even if it's not specifically meaningful to me, it's providing a contribution to the greater good or to the community in some way. And I think when I started, I tended to take a lot of contracts just because it was a contract and it was revenue generating. And I found that I had a hard time with being motivated in the morning to go to work on some of those things that maybe weren't really in alignment with my values, or I didn't feel them to be as meaningful. And they honestly took a lot more energy than the ones that I felt more closely connected to. And that was a really hard lesson for me, particularly when you talk about, the uncertainty and the fear and wanting to kind of have some cash in the coffers, which we all hope for and need to kind of buffer against the tougher times. Um, Jaime, I'm curious what gets you up in the morning and how do you stay motivated to work on things for your clients and for your business?
I find marketing higher education is a calling for me. It feels like more than a job. I believe that higher education is absolutely integral to our future, to our democracy, to having a productive and thriving democracy and just basically life. And so the work that I do is really driven by the belief that if higher education doesn't nail marketing, it's not going to be successful. And the institutions that are not doing marketing well or are not doing it in a mature way or in an integrative way are not going to be able to thrive in the long term. And so I really feel like what I'm doing is really helping to make universities and help institutions continue on into the coming years. And for me, because it's such a calling, that just motivates me every single day to get up and do it over and over and over again. And being able to do it as a business versus just helping one institution thrive, being able to help all of my client institutions thrive is just one of the best parts about having started this company. And I really, the community that I'm a part of, the higher ed marketing community, the higher ed community, just absolutely, if I'm having a down day where I'm not feeling it, I have this great network of people that remind me why I do this and why it's so important. And that's what gets me up in the morning. It's what gets my feet on the ground in the morning. I'm not going to let this industry die. I'm going to fight for it. And that's why I'm here and why I'm doing what I do.
I'm going to throw a question to you, Jaime, too, because if you both of you have talked about networking quite a bit and building that sort of virtual community of colleagues. For our attendees today, if you had some pieces of advice as they're starting, or perhaps they're feeling like they don't have that kind of support, what's your advice to someone about how to choose the right networks? How do we evaluate the ones you go to? Because again, like Kristin, I could go to something every single day if I wanted to. How do you really pick where you go, what you do, and what you choose to kind of give your energy to?
Yeah, for me, the higher ed marketing community made sense because I was a higher ed marketer, and building an authentic network of people who I had mutual respect with was so pivotal in that really fast and successful launch of my company, because I had people who were like, yep, I know you, I know you're good, I'm going to start working with you. In terms of kind of identifying what network makes the most sense, for me, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to be involved in the chamber from a business development perspective because I'm not working with those types of businesses. So kind of figuring out where your niche is and identify the folks that are working that niche and building your network there. I think if you're building a network, if you're not working locally, right? If you're starting a company that has a more broader geographic appeal or market, social media and starting to build a network on social media, I think is, and I'm sure Kristin can talk about all about how to do that.
Yeah.
But building that network on social media, because you're not going to be able to be at a luncheon with somebody in Idaho if you're in Virginia. And so having to really leverage social media and LinkedIn, Blue Sky, whatever platform, I think that really helps build that network. But like I said, I wouldn't get involved in a chamber unless I'm like, I want to have people to just have as friends and allies that can share my, challenges that I'm having as a business owner. That audience wouldn't make as much sense for me as it would
Okay.
for probably Kristin.
So the takeaway is to really understand your niche, really understand what you need for support. And I think also to make sure that the community that you build around yourself knows your business and understands what you do, or at least some of it. Kristin, what's your advice for a new entrepreneur looking to build that kind of virtual community of colleagues?
Yeah, I definitely think this for me has became very organic, has built off of, just my background, in higher education. I was connected to those folks, and then those folks introduced me to some of like the leadership things that go on in our community. That's how I went to the chamber the first time I was nominated for a leadership program. And so then I learned about the chamber, and then from the chamber, I learned about the statewide stuff you can be involved in. So I think organically building that, like I always say in my network, I have people that use me, obviously clients. And then I have people that would never use me, but refer me like daily.
Mhm.
And so I think in any network you do is kind of realizing what you want to be known for. And always my advice in marketing is everyone wants to be educated, right? I mean, least the people I know, we're calling TikTok micro education now, micro learning now. So, I mean, I feel like everyone wants to be educated. People are, and consumers are doing more research now than ever to buy something. So if we can become kind of the educator, and that's where I've, kind of came in. I don't know if it's my higher education background. I always laugh and said I was teaching small business entrepreneurship and saying I would never open a business, but you probably should. So I don't know if it's that teaching background, but I've always wanted to educate people, empower them, and then they come back to you. I feel like, oh, that's the expert in the field. That's the person that if I have a question, I ask. And so you kind of build this network organically from those people. So I've been really lucky that, I have those people that I do get to meet because of networking events. But then I have people that I have two clients right now that somebody from Integrate, which is the conference at WU in Morgantown, they referred me to them just because they heard me speak probably the same time Bonnie did a couple years ago and referred me. So I think keeping that network of people that, see you as the educator, being online social is great. I would say perception is everything. I have people that come up to me and say, oh my gosh, you've been so busy. Or, oh my gosh, what were you doing in XYZ town, and so I think the perception of social media, using that part of things to, I always say, you're going to find some information about me and what I do online, but you're going to really know what I'm doing, who I'm involved in, what my background is from social media. And then you can, build those relationships via social media. And then hopefully that'll turn into clients and networking and referrals and all of that. But I think it's definitely been, at different levels, like local level, and then even like I said, at the conference, meeting somebody who referred me at a national, even like one of the clients is a global client now. That level of networking has always been my number one. And I think that's kind of my soapbox. I get on my networking soapbox because I feel like that is one thing that we can control, I guess. Like there's a ton of things you could go do. You can go online and you can network that way. So, that's one way that you can kind of get your name out there when you're just starting.
Okay. Something that you said and something that Jaime said sparked another question for me, which was obviously as entrepreneurs, we all know that LinkedIn is important, right? But Kristin, you work in social media. You advise business owners all the time on which channels to select. I mean, are there places that you feel like women entrepreneurs, however you want to categorize us, really need to be that might not be so obvious? Are you giving anyone any advice these days that's, Jaime mentioned blue sky, which is really exploding right now. How do you kind of advise people? What sort of parameters do you look at when you explain to these clients of yours where they need to be present in social media?
I always start with where you feel the most comfortable, because we know, because we're probably all on social medias that we don't use every day. So we know we're going to use the social media that we're the most comfortable at. And so some people will be like, oh, that's Facebook. Really? Like my clients are on Facebook? Well, they might be, 15 years ago, no one would have sent me a Facebook message asking me to meet or talk about a business. And now absolutely they would any day. So I think it's really figuring out where you feel the most comfortable. I know Heather mentioned being a business coach. I went through like a coaching thing. I met that person through Instagram. They were educating me on Instagram. I think it was probably an ad starting out, started following her, did her group session, and that has really been a big, it was a big change for me about 7 or 8 years ago. So I think really figuring out where your customers are, but also where you're going to be the most comfortable, because content only works if you're putting it out there. And so if you get on a social media, like I'm really bad at LinkedIn, but I know people and I live with somebody that's the only social media they're on. And so that's where he tells me all the time what's going on LinkedIn, but you got to, wherever you feel comfortable, you're going to do the best, So I think I love when new social medias pop up. I'm a lurker. I love to lurk. I love to watch. I love to ask. I know people that are on it. I ask them questions. I get over there. I read, and I just see what's going on over there, and noting that not every social media platform is a best fit for everybody. So really utilizing your time. Because we could be, again, just like networking, we could be sucked into all these social medias. And are we going to get anything out of it at the end of the day? Maybe not. So if we really hone in on the one that we like the most and that where our customers are, and that can be, a little, flexible, I guess, there.
That's great advice, because I see so many people being told, oh, you need to be on this, you need to be on that, but their personalities just don't lend themselves to that. Or they're told to be on Instagram, but they're not necessarily that visual of a communicator. And so I'm going to take that one to heart too, because I also tend to try to be on everything, which leads to more burnout, right? I want to ask both of you, and I guess I'm going to just let whoever wants to jump in first. I know, Kristin, you write a lot of blogs, you present, but where are the places that you go or the resources that you like to visit on a regular basis for advice, for feedback, for anything that will help you kind of grow? Because I think for me, one of the things as an entrepreneur is constantly improving my skills has been vital to staying in business. And I don't have time to always go to school every day, but I do try to read certain blogs, listen to podcasts. What are some of the resources that you two listen to, read? And I would also ask our attendees to throw anything into the chat on things that they like to listen to or read, or conferences that they've enjoyed going to. But whichever one of you wants to jump in on that.
You want me to start? I can start.
Sure.
Oh, one resource that I've been familiar with for probably 20 years is a Small Business Development Center. And I believe that every state has one. I think it's state, and maybe somebody's in here from one that could correct me, but I believe they're state. I'm pretty active with the one that is in Ohio by me. And they have so many counties, and they offer free resources, and they offer free trainings to people within those counties. So it's something that I was referring students to 20 years ago in my small business entrepreneurship class. And then I've actually turned into a vendor for them because I got to sit with them at a annual dinner for a chamber randomly because I went by myself. And she said, we need to talk. And then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, 4 years later, I've been doing virtual trainings for them. So they do marketing trainings, they do account, they do QuickBooks, Excel, all the stuff I get asked, do you know anybody? So that's a really good resource. The SBDC is also, or excuse me, the SBA is also, the Small Business Administration is also a good resource. Anytime you can see like a webinar from them or even a face-to-face from them, I absolutely think that's a good resource to take some time and educate yourself. You know, if you have employees, I always look for the HR stuff. You know, there's always those kinds of things popping up. I do a yearly training with she's pretty much like a Facebook expert. I always sit down and do her training, which is starting actually today at 3. So I'm doing that this year. Like I mentioned before, have used a business coach before. I'm not used like the one-on-one coaching, but I've done some group coaching, which I think is probably pretty affordable for new entrepreneurs starting out. You get like all the benefits, but maybe not as cost as much. But it definitely can help you think outside that. I use Facebook groups. That's my preferred social media. Millennial mom or whatever I am, elder millennial. That's my preferred social media. I'm almost embarrassed to say that, but it is. And so I'm involved in a lot of groups. I have, marketing conference groups I'm in, social media groups I'm in, and I read a lot, so if they post something and it's an article, I'll probably read it. I'm a reader. So I try to do the same thing. Podcasts of something that I've really gotten into probably pre-COVID, where we drove all the time, and now not, I'm listening to it now on my computer, but I try to subscribe to some stuff and listen to the newest, whatever says newest thing in marketing, I try to listen to, and even business, because we learn about that. I think you're talking about the business ownership form or whatever we had to do for this year. I learned about that, and that kind of thing is essential to our business because, sometimes if you're not, working with an advisor or something like that with SPDC, you don't know that kind of stuff you have to do. So I try to really educate myself. Particular podcast. I was like, I'll have to look at my phone. I'll let Jaime talk, but I'll
while you do that, let's see. Jaime, do you want to weigh in on some of the resources that?
Yeah, I'm as a podcaster, podcasts are my go-to. So in 2 ways, right? So as a podcaster, doing the podcast helps me learn and grow and be introduced to new concepts. I publish my podcast every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I'm talking to someone who's an expert in this industry. That's keeping me fresh, researching, preparing, doing the interviewing, talking to the person. That keeps me really fresh. But I'm also a big podcast listener. And a couple that I would really strongly recommend. There's a Women at Work podcast that is, I think, one of the best ones out there. Not just for entrepreneurs, but for women who are in the working world. They typically have a couple of guests on, and then they have folks that come on and talk about a challenge that they're having as a woman in the workplace, and then they have the experts kind of talk through what that challenge is. And that one is produced by Harvard Business Review. I also really enjoy Future You, which is a podcast by Jeff Salingo, that is all about the future of higher education. I think that one's a really important one to listen to. Higher Ed Pulse, which is about a 20 to 30-minute podcast every week that really touches on some really important trends that are happening in the industry. Of course, there's my own podcast, Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, that I strongly recommend people give a try. And then I also go to a lot of conferences. A big part of my business is public speaking. And so I get to go to the conference, I get to get paid, I get to travel, and I get to go to a conference for free typically, which is fantastic. I also do a lot of work in artificial intelligence and in training people on artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of podcasts around that. There's AI for You, is one that's coming off the top of my head. But there's tons of resources out there for AI. I could probably pull together a pretty comprehensive list if I just go to them, you know what I mean? Like it's not something where I have a list in front of me, but spending a lot of time staying on top of AI is a really big piece of what I do. And then I
That's
would
great.
say
Oh,
just
sorry,
being,
go ahead.
oh, sorry, just being part
No,
of the network. So I'm in a Slack group with about 180 other women who work in higher ed marketing. And we are just constantly sharing articles, ideas with each other, bouncing things off of each other. And that's another great way to stay sort of on the top of my game.
I agree with you about the Slack channels because I'm in a couple as well, some for marketing entrepreneurs and some for just like women entrepreneurs. And some of the ones that aren't as big can be places where I've actually made personal connections and then kind of taken it offline and grown my community that way too. So highly recommend Slack. Dominique mentions in here that she used the Small Business Administration for one-on-one coaching during COVID and received grants for added support. I think we should all remember that organizations like SCORE and the Small Business Administration are there to help us, and they have a huge number of resources. I know for me, I go sometimes, and this goes back to kind of the motivational piece too. I sort of have my heroes in business, and I like to listen to them and I like to read their daily newsletters. Some of those people include he's a futurist and a tech person. I can know the tech industry. Brian Solis, I found it to be particularly both pragmatic and inspirational. I love Marty Robbins. Of course, even Brene Brown, I think, has some amazing insights on vulnerability and some of those things that are really helpful to us as women business owners. We've got probably, maybe 6 minutes left in our conversation. So I'm going to throw another question out. And this goes back to some of the recurring themes that I've heard about having a lot to do, really understanding our own skills, understanding where we want to spend our time and trying to maximize that amount of time. So, Jaime, do you have any advice for our attendees on how you approach delegation? So we've talked about this before, outsourcing, but I think, and personally, it's very hard for me sometimes to let go of some of these things. And particularly when you're starting out and there isn't a lot of revenue, frankly, to pay other people. Do you have any advice on how people can kind of really look at delegation, when to outsource, kind of go back to that and go a little deeper with some points that have been, particularly as a new entrepreneur, really helpful for you?
Yeah, I think understanding that your time has value and making sure that what you personally are doing is the most impactful work, and that you're delegating the work that doesn't need your brain power. And I think if you think about it like that, if you think about, let's say that your, hourly rate is $250, $300 an hour. Do you want to pay somebody $250 or $300 an hour to make copies? Do you want to pay somebody $250 to $300 an hour to do X, Y, or Z? Or where does it make more sense for you to be doing something more impactful, even if it's business development or it's actual work for your clients? I find that equation to be a lot easier when I'm making a decision about what to outsource. But also, there are parts of what I do that aren't my strength necessarily. So I'm not a media buyer, for example. And for me to try to upskill and learn media buying isn't something that I think is a good investment of my time when there's so many other great agencies that do media buying. So if I were to say, I have a proposal with a client that has a media buying aspect to it, I partner with another agency or with a media buyer so that we work on that together, so that I'm not spending my time on something I'm not necessarily good at or don't enjoy doing. And I'm instead bringing a really talented partner that can do that work instead. And I think I have a lot of these sort of shared partnerships with other folks where we're like, we'll send each other business that doesn't fit into what our main focus is, but we'll also bring you in if there's a project that doesn't have one of my strengths. I think thinking about it like that opens the doors to so many more opportunities for business, because now you're not turning something down because you don't know how to do it or it's not something you do well. You're still able to say yes to that business, build that connection. It might lead to other business down the road. And now you're partnering with somebody and you have another thought leader working with you on it.
I think that's such a great point. I remember a book, The Gig Economy. I don't know if you read Daniel Pink, he's another one of my heroes, but he was always talking about how this new sort of solopreneur contractor economy would bring people together, similar to the movie business, where they get everyone together for a particular project, then everyone goes off, you know who you love to work with. It brings you into new work. It gives new work to your virtual colleagues. And I think that's a really good point about delegation, that it's not just delegating internal tasks, it's delegating the work that can help you in the long run as well. I don't know, Kristin, how do you weigh in on that question about delegation?
Well, one, knowing that from the beginning, Jaime, I think is like the key to success. I talk to people all the time about partnering, and some people are so against it. They're worried about, I would say, somebody making one more penny than they make, and how silly that is. But once you partner and once you start building those relationships and really knowing, like I said to somebody a few years ago, I'm tired of doing stuff I hate. I'm refusing to do anything I hate anymore, which we all know is not the truth. But if I put that out in the universe, maybe that'll happen. But by doing that and by saying that, I'm like, that person, right before we got on this call, that person's a better graphic designer than I'll ever be. I'm not a graphic designer. We all know video is hot. I've talked to a lot of marketers that have several years more experience than I do, and they've just said, I'm done. I'm not going to do video. And I said, why don't you just find somebody that can do it in 5 minutes and pay them to do it instead of you giving it up? Or like me, I would try to do it and it would take me 3 hours, which is not a good use of my time. So I think understanding that partnership, and I mean, just in the last few years, I think people have started to understand that, because I've had agencies who probably would have walked right past me 5, 10 years ago, call me and be like, hey, we can't afford a full-time person doing social media anymore, but we still have clients that have need. How can we work with you? And then vice versa. Like, they have a website person. Hey, this person would be great. And guess what? If you work with them, you probably will get to work with me too. And so that's really mutually beneficial to everybody. Like I always say, like, I don't need every client. I don't even want every client. I want every client that is a good fit for me. And then there is a ton more people out there that are a great fit for somebody else. And so I'm a big believer in partnerships and try to get my clients to partner, because I do see the success of that in almost every industry.
I think it's that kind of interdependence that's connected, even though we're not in the same company. And that was, for me, such a joy, was finding these virtual colleagues and finding these project partners that could be there with me kind of on my entrepreneurial journey, because it does get really lonely sometimes. It can be very isolating. And knowing that I had people to call on who became my friends eventually, has been just a huge bonus to my own business. I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, Kristin, but I knew you were looking at your phone, trying to look at some of those podcast recommendations. Did you come up with some that you might
Yes,
offer up to everyone?
I put them in the chat.
Okay.
Social media marketing happy hour, which they paused, they came back, and I think they're on a pause again. But even the older ones, I think if you have any questions, and I know like here's some questions like I get all the time from small business, like search engine optimization, like funnels, email marketing, they kind of tackle those things that are really challenging. I mean, honestly, to all of us, like if I crack the code to SEO, like I don't know. I don't think I could ever do that. So I really like that. Amy Porterfield is somebody that I've always followed. I have hers popping up, just to kind of see, like she seems to be pretty up on the trends of social media. And
Okay. Yeah, I would add too, if people are looking for advice on marketing, I mean, I'm a huge fan of all the resources in marketing profs and Ann Handley, who I think is incredibly inspirational and has lots and lots of good advice. And I'm sure Kristin has followed that too. So I guess we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to encourage any kind of questions people have, or if they have other podcasts that they're listening to put those in the chat. But I'm going to throw a question to Jaime and to Kristin that they're not expecting, because I love to do that at the end of panels. But I want to ask you, since it is Women's Entrepreneur Day, on Women's Entrepreneurship Day, as a marketing person, I want to get that right. Are there specific skills, or as women, do you feel that you may have specific strengths that have really lent themselves to your success as an entrepreneur? Kristin, I'll start with you.
I think one of the biggest one is self-discipline. There's days where I could probably just like stay in bed all day or all week if I wanted to. But just being self-motivated, I think is a big one for me that I see that, like I see that now. Like I always say, if you hang out with me long enough, I'll bully you into being an entrepreneur. And I jokingly say that, but I do know that it's not for everybody. It definitely is, has its benefits, has its pros, has its cons, just like everything else. And so I think going into entrepreneurship and kind of, knowing that you're going to have to do some things that maybe you don't like to do all the time, and being flexible. I can now look back and kind of see people and be like, they're going to be successful because they're willing to do anything and everything. And then I'll have somebody say, well, I don't like to public speak. And I'm like, well, if you want to go and talk about your business, then you're going to have to learn how to public speak, And so I definitely applaud all those business coaches, because I'd be like, just go do it, why be scared? Just go do it. But I understand the fear there too. And there are people that, I'll see and I'll say, I worked for a couple hours on Sunday, and they'll say, oh, I would never do that. And I'm like, well, I'll work a couple hours on Sunday, and then I'll go to a hot yoga class on Monday morning, or pick my kid up from school every day. I'm not willing to not do that. So I think that kind of thing comes to light. And I think it's an honor there's even a day, because I do think being a woman entrepreneur is a definite privilege that we have not always had. And so I think that's something that I take to heart, that even as my daughter was watching cartoons and I took her to a restaurant and I said, meet the owner, the chef, and she goes, oh, it's a girl chef, because she had watched Daniel Tiger where it was a boy chef. And so I told her, she's a business owner and a woman chef. So I think those kinds of things are so important. And anytime we can talk to young women about entrepreneurship, even if it's on the side of what they're doing full time, I think it's important to encourage and support other women entrepreneurs any chance we get.
Jaime, any last comments on that question, or anything that you would like to tell the group here today, as we kind of at the last minute of our space here?
Yeah, I would say as women and as a woman, I feel like there have been a lot of times where I've been underestimated and sort of kind of not thought about in the same way that some of my male peers in business have been thought about. And I think that resilience And that ability to continue to just like kick butt despite that is what's going to let you kick butt as an entrepreneur. That fact that you just keep going and you keep trying despite what other obstacles are in your way throughout your career as a woman, that is setting you up for success as an entrepreneur. And so don't lose that, and don't ever think that boys can do better than you can do. I love the phrase like it's hard, boys do it. Like we got this. You have the skills, you can do it.
I love that. Be unstoppable, in other words, no matter
Yeah.
what the bias is, right? Well, I just thank you to everyone for joining us, and a special thanks to Jaime and Kristin for sharing all of their knowledge and experiences with us today. I want to tell you to be sure to visit integrate.wvu.edu for upcoming sessions like this, recordings of previous episodes, including this one, and to make sure that you subscribe to receive updates for these types of sessions. But thanks to everyone, and I hope you all have just a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.